Now, it's all about cutting car insurance costs today, but actually pretty much everything I'm talking about applies to home insurance too, so you can do a read across on that. The first thing to say is that talking beats price walking. Price walking is the fact that when you go to an insurer, if you stick with them, each year they walk the price up by 20 or 30 quid. So the longer you're with them, the more you pay. This is such a substantial issue, the regulator is actually looking at banning it. So new customers and existing customers must get the same, but that hasn't happened yet, which is why my golden rule is never auto-renew without checking prices elsewhere first. To put it in context, if your new car insurance costs £285, on average, after 5 years, it would cost £370. And for car and home insurance, there are 10 million people who've been with their insurer for 5 years or more. That is a big issue. Loyalty does not pay here. But timing is everything. Look at this graph. This is based on millions of quotes across comparison sites. Now, this is not about your renewal price. It's the cheapest price you'll get on a comparison on the days before you renew. So look, if you try and do a renewal, if you try and get a quote 30 days before, price is pretty high. Then it drops very rapidly. The sweet spot is around 21 days, but anything 3 or 4 weeks. And then it starts to go up and up and up until we're talking about renewing at the last moment, which is nearly twice the cost. Now, you'll say that makes no sense. Why? Well, there is a reason. Insurance pricing is based on risk. And if you are the type of person who leaves it to the last minute, their risk charts show you're a more risky person, so they'll charge you more. So play their risk odds against them and renew earlier in that sweet spot of 3 to 4 weeks, and you can save money. You've got your success face on. Have you got success?
I have. Well, do you know what? You mentioned this on the show a couple of weeks back, and Matthew's been in touch. Have a look at this.
As a regular viewer of the show, my mum contacted me regarding Martin's 21-day comparison tip, as my car insurance was up for renewal at the end of the month. I went online. I'd saved over £450, which came at a really important time as I was on furlough during the first lockdown. A huge thanks to Martin and his team for their advice, and my mum for giving me the heads up. Cheers, Martin.
I mean, that was a couple of years ago, but £400 just by going in a few weeks earlier is brilliant.
This is mammoth savings and an absolute must-do. But that's not my only tip. Let's go on and do a few more. So, first thing, many people use comparison sites. Not wrong with doing that, but don't just use one. Not just the fact that different comparison sites have different insurers, so do more than one and you get more companies, but also these days the regulations state they're actually more marketplaces than comparison sites. They're allowed to have their own individual prices for different insurers as long as it's not more expensive than direct. So the same insurer may have different prices on different comparison sites, so trying more than one can really bring your price down. If you've got time to, check Direct Line. It's the only major insurer that isn't on comparison sites. If you're struggling to find a decent policy or a policy at all, perhaps because you've got difficult circumstances like you've been banned from driving in the past, then talk to a broker and see if you can get an individual policy. Now, the next savings sort of make no sense until you start thinking about risk. They're counter-logical, and the only way to do this is trial and error. First thing, especially for younger drivers, try adding a second driver, usually someone older and more experienced, to your policy, as long as there's someone who'd legitimately drive your car or may drive your car at some point. Parents are the obvious ones. What that happens is you're high risk, they're low risk, and the price is then based on the average risk. Never put them as the first driver if they're not the first driver. That's illegal. Try it. It can save people hundreds of pounds, genuinely.